G'day, I'm Ali Amo, and this is the Lease on Life podcast. I've recently written a book called Detangling, The Web of Life, the complete guide to understanding you and everyone else. It's all about the philosophy that I created called the Web of Life. You may have heard that concept before. Some people have, some people haven't. Either way, I figured why the hell not just whip out a potty to bring the philosophy and the book to life while starting a conversation with the world. For those of you who are new, welcome. And we're starting to look at the foundation strand of your web of life. That is your relationships and your environment. Last episode, we looked at the cycle of abuse and all of the forms that it can take in the relationships and environments that we're in. And it was pretty heavy, I'm not going to lie. But there's this massive misconception when it comes to personal growth and self-development that I felt was necessary to unpack before we move on. Because it says something not just about the foundation of our growth journey, but the foundation of ourselves and how we learn what those foundations look like. The idea that self-discovery is this long and lonely journey is a bit of a myth. That's not to say that you cannot grow and improve yourself whilst being alone. The misconception is that you need to detach and distance yourself from others and isolate to be able to discover who you really are, how you really are, and why you really are a certain way. And that's not true. It's actually in the throes of life, in the midst of your experiences, that you have the most valuable opportunity to gain unique, profound, and powerful insights into the self. And that happens in your relationships and in your environments. The idea that I want to present to you is to use your life as it is to start your personal growth journey, not to change anything about it, but to start to inquire in your experiences and gain that insight into yourself. Granted, there is a lot of value in isolating and connecting within to discover things. You can't necessarily gain as much insight into yourself meditating in a group as you can when you're alone. That's also not to say that you can't have amazing experiences in meditation when you're doing that with a group and discover things about yourself. I've done both, and they're very different, but equally valuable experiences. I've also done kinds of meditations when you're with a bunch of people that you don't know, chanting in Sanskrit. I've had meditative experiences in a group setting where I know majority of the people and we're all having individual experiences collectively. And something interesting that I discovered, one of the participants in the group meditation had all of these visualizations occur that made no sense to him at the time because they seemed very disjointed. It wasn't until we came out of meditation and started sharing our experiences with one another that he discovered that all of those random visual images and things that he was getting in his meditation were actually bits and pieces coming from other people's experiences. And that showed me that the collective consciousness isn't separate to the individual consciousness. Otherwise, how was he able to do that? Tap into everybody else's experiences through his own. So there's value that comes from doing things alone, but with other people. And it's that same idea that you can be surrounded by a bunch of people and still feel alone. It's through our experiences with other people that we can gain the most insight into ourselves, because it takes other other influences to trigger our cycles to repeat. And a lot of the expressions or the physical representations or manifestations of our cycle happen in our environments and in our relationships. So instead of distancing yourself and spending time alone to figure out who you are, you start by living your life as you regularly do and start to develop your awareness in the throes of your experiences. That's what I call the passive spectator. And then after a while, you graduate and become the expert witness. So the way I think it's best to understand those two roles or those perspectives that you take on the self is like lucid dreaming. The idea that when you're asleep, what's happening is happening below your conscious awareness, and you want to become conscious in that experience so you can take control of it. But before you take control while you're lucid dreaming, you start to observe what happens naturally. You're just aware of what's happening when normally you're not. And then you remember that when you wake up. So to do this in your daily life, you first need to recognize the emotional cycles as they are triggered to run. It's those that then spark your mental cycles to start spiraling. And both of those and the energy from those put together bring things into physical. And in the physical cycles, it's usually very obvious what we say and what we do. And those are the things that people try to focus on breaking. That's what they think the cycle is. It's not. It's far deeper than that. It's like if you're watching a volcano explode, it doesn't just explode without all of these things happening beneath the surface, and there's stages and phases that things go through to get to the point of eruption. And the same goes with us. So in your experiences with the people around you, regardless of the relationship, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a stranger, whether it's somebody that you know but just have this stuff that comes up or stuff that they trigger to come up in you. It doesn't happen without them. Happens a lot with family, can also happen with friends and in your partner relationships. So if you're wanting to discover who you are, you're not going up to a cabin somewhere to meditate and journal to discover how you operate, why you operate, and when things are triggered to run a certain way. You learn that in your relationships with people, living your daily life as it is. And the idea is to start to wake up to what you're doing, when you're doing it, and why you're doing it. And it doesn't start with what you're doing outside of you, the things you're saying and doing physically. It starts with what's happening within. So to become the passive spectator, it's almost like you're splitting your consciousness into. You're in the moment, but you're not lost in the moment and then reacting on impulse to the sensations that you feel and the emotions that arise, which trigger your thoughts, and then start acting on them without being aware, like you press the pause button just for a second before you press play again. And once you can recognize these sensations or this massive sensation is occurring inside of me, because that energy, that force is what starts your cycle to repeat. And that's like part of your consciousness. It's like you're able to watch yourself enough to recognize this is happening, something's happening. You press pause to just notice what it is that you're feeling, what the sensation is, and how it feels. Sometimes even where you feel it in your body. And then you press play again. And then your thoughts start to run. And before you get taken away, there's always this, like there's a primary sensation that you feel for your emotion. There's a primary thought that goes on. And it's very much connected to that emotion. So while you're passive spectating, you press pause again, just to record like a mental note of what that thought was. Press play, let the thoughts run, and then what you're saying and doing, often you remember for the most part, or you get a general consensus, like a general idea of everybody knows that these things that you say and these things that you do, all these things that you don't do. That's when having that solitude becomes beneficial to you, because you've pressed pause enough throughout the cycle to start to recognize how it works and how you work within it. Then, if you're doing the journaling stuff on your own, you can start to isolate what that emotion is, what it feels like, where you feel it, and what actually bugged you enough to feel that again. So you can label, pinpoint what that emotion is. You press pause through your mental cycle enough to know what that thought was, and don't think into and try to remember. Just go with whatever you paused on to begin with, because you will recognize that next time it comes around with whoever it comes around with, in whatever place you are when that happens. You've watched yourself do it passively, but you've also let it happen. When you become the expert witness, you've done this enough that you can recognize the emotion, you recognize the mental cycle, the thoughts that go on. You know everything about that sensation, so that the moment that it arises, you're almost taking the perspective of the split consciousness instead of the in the moment. You're watching yourself in the moment, and you know the sorts of thoughts that'll come up. So when they do, instead of being in your head with those thoughts, being charged by your emotions, and then it comes out in your expression, it's almost like you can write the script of what you're going to be thinking, of what you're going to be thinking about doing, and then what's likely for you to be doing right now, what's coming next. But you let it happen to the point where you start to see how your cycle spirals and how you spiral around with your cycles in all the different relationships and environments that you have. Then you have enough knowledge about how the cycle operates that you can break it. Then having that time meditating and journaling about it becomes a completely different experience, because you're not doing it separate from an event or an experience that you've had that has brought up something to the surface that needs to be addressed. And it doesn't happen without awareness. And awareness doesn't happen without those experiences. So a lot of people spend a lot of time on their solo self growth journey when they're missing the value and the opportunity that comes from being in your experiences with other people in places and seeing how things unfold. That's where your growth happens, when you're able to recognize what you do, when you do it, where you do it, how you do it, who you do it with, and then you can figure out the whys behind it. So although the misconception is the self-discovery, self-recovery, self-mastery journey is long and very lonely, it doesn't have to be. And you also don't have to do it alone. The people around you are your greatest tool to be able to gain insight into yourself. And that's what makes the solitude to start to unpack those things and unravel and detangle your web much more valuable. The time is spent reflecting on things that are fresh in the mind and clear. Otherwise, if you try to unravel a cycle after you've just repeated it alone, you've disconnected from the emotion, from the thoughts, and very much from the actions. You might play the story back a little bit differently in your mind. If you've been able to press pause in the throes of things and just mentally record the sensation, the emotions, the thoughts, and the force, the urges that you got and the ones that you acted upon, when and where and how you did that, you have a greater chance of understanding the full operation of your cycle. Even things like toxic relationships, for example. Something I notice people do is, once they've recognized that they're in a toxic relationship, they cut the relationship off, distance themselves, thinking that they've stopped that cycle from repeating. The only thing that they've actually done is stop that cycle from repeating in that relationship or in that environment. That doesn't teach them how the cycle works enough for them to be able to recognize it next time around. So people can bounce around from one toxic relationship or one toxic environment to another because they haven't realized how the actual cycle unfolds and how they connect with it, repeat it, perpetuate it, or just accept it happening around them enough that eventually that cycle's inflicted enough that they self-inflict. Once you've recognized you're in a toxic relationship, as the example, to continue to participate in that relationship for a period of time to learn how it operates, how you operate, the sensations that you feel, the emotions, the thoughts, the actions and inactions. That's where your growth happens so that you can recognize that cycle if it starts to repeat again around you. You can recognize what's happening within yourself because you've done the work. And that relationship can be of value to you in the end, not just some negative experience that you've had that you only learned how to break away from and not how to stop from happening ever again. There's a difference when you're in a relationship that may have negative experiences and you're taking that as an opportunity to learn and grow yourself, to strengthen from within, than if you're just participating in it, knowing it's occurring and not knowing what to do about it, or thinking that to continue to participate in this relationship is not going to benefit me, so I'm going to walk away. What are you learning about yourself in that? And how can you break that cycle so that it doesn't happen again in the future? So there's always something you can gain from continuing the life as is while you're on your journey of growth and development. Don't believe the myth that you have to do it alone, that you need to be alone, and that you need to just focus on within and not see what happens within while you are around others and in other places. So thanks for being here with me for this end. New ones will come out to you every other Thursday. If you'd like to get a copy of the book, just head to my website, www.weboflife.au. While you're there, you can grab a copy of the complete Web of Life free PDF. If you'd like to stay up to date with the world of Ali Ammo, follow me on socials. Take care and I'll see you soon.